guys, I'm Cameron and welcome back to my channel where we sip tea and also spill the tea as I talk about some of my favorite reads. So today we are going to be doing my January wrap up where I talk about all the books that I read in the month of January, which was a hefty lot of 15 books. Let's get into this video and yeah. So the first book that I read in the month of February was Stay With Me by Nicole Fiorina. So this follows a girl named Mia who is suffering from sociopathic tendencies, and she is somebody who she always wants to rebel against her parents. One of these rebellions just happens to go a step very much too far, and her parents decide that the only thing they can do to her is to send her away to a boarding school that happens to be all the way in the UK. And this boarding school is to help rehabilitate men and women who are not just in their teens but who also happen to be in their 20s. So our girl Mia, she goes to this boarding school, and it's here that she ends up meeting a very sexy and sweet boy named Oliver who goes by Ollie, and she starts to hang out with his group of friends and she hangs out more with him, and as they start to know each other, he starts to slowly chip away at her apathy, and she starts to find herself slowly starting to feel more emotions whenever she's around him. And it's here that they start to have a bit of a romance, which turns into a full-on relationship. This book reminds me so much of After by Amanda Todd, because the friend group that our girl is hanging out with, they just give off the same vibes of the friend group that was in the After story, because all of the people in this group are always up to no good. They are always partying, and that whole element of the story reminds me so much of that book. So if you liked that book, then I feel like you would like this as well. Now, I also have to say, while I really enjoyed the author's writing, there was a bit of immaturity in all of the characters that I just could not find myself really enjoying. I was supposed to be reading about a group of 20-year-olds. It felt like I was reading about a group of horny teens in high school. It was just totally giving me off those type of vibes. So yeah, guys, this book, while it did keep my attention, I have to say that it was not my favorite of the month, but it was still really amazing to be able to watch as Mia goes on her journey of self-discovery and goes on her journey of trying to heal from her mental illness, from her sociopathic tendencies that she suffers from. I really enjoyed that side of things, and I did like Oliver's character, although I just could not really get myself to be here for their relationship because I just felt like it was so beyond rushed. I felt like they were admitting their undying love for each other only like 10 minutes after knowing each other. That was kind of weird. But I did enjoy the story overall, and it still kept my attention. So if you want a good contemporary read that just so happens to talk about mental illnesses and about healing, then definitely check this book out. Okay guys, so right after I read that book, I decided to do a little reread, and I ended up rereading The Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I'm not even going to really explain this book because I feel like everybody who loves books has read this book or has heard about this book, because it is literally like the reigning champion of YA fantasy. But I will just say very quickly that this just follows a girl named Selena. She is an assassin, and she ends up going to a kingdom to compete with other assassins to become the king's right-hand champion, which is basically like his glorified bodyguard slash assassin. And so our girl comes here, and while she's doing this, there happens to be a little romance on the side. And guys, I just have to say that this book was just as fabulous as it was the first time around. But I do have to say that while I enjoyed this book and while it was very riveting and fun to read about, it's definitely not my favorite book of the series. I can tell that this book is very much YA, but as you start to read the books, it slowly starts to branch off of the YA fiction and it starts to become more like a new adult series. And that is why I think I love those books more, because I'm somebody who I love new adult romance and new adult books in general, and this book is definitely very much YA. But that is something that I find really, really cool about our author, because you can truly see how Celaena Sardothien slowly starts to age and become more mature throughout the whole series as it branches from YA to new adult. It's like this book genre is growing with Celaena as she ages, and I just have to say that that is something that is so interesting. I've never seen that done before. I thought that is so cool. So guys, did I like this book? Absolutely. Do I like it as much as all the other books? Not really, but it was still fabulous and it was still fun, and I would suggest this to anybody who wants to read a book about assassins and about love and misadventures, and who just wants to read about a sassy, freaking amazing heroine. Check this book out, okay? So that is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Okay, you guys. So, I almost made my light fall. That's not a good thing. Okay, so the next book that I read was another contemporary romance, and that is called Something in the Way by Jessica Hawkins. So this follows a girl who is in high school. I believe she's 16 years old, and meets a guy named Manning, and he is older than her. He is like 23, I think. I don't really remember. Like I said, I read a lot of books last month, so some of the characters and their ages are starting to just like mold together in one big miasma of books. But anyways, this follows a girl, a very, very young girl, who meets an older man by a chance encounter, and it's here that right after she meets him, her older sister, she meets him as well. And she decides that she really likes what she sees. She likes Manning. And so our girl's older sister starts to have a relationship with Manning. And Manning, because he feels some type of connection for the younger sister, he decides to get into this relationship with the older sister so that he can still have a way of being able to be around the younger sister. Guys, this book is absolutely so complicated. The relationship between Manning and the younger sister is just so extraordinary, so complicated, but so beautiful as well. And guys, I would say if you're somebody who you love a forbidden romance, then definitely read this book, because this romance is so freaking forbidden. It has that taboo age gap romance, and yeah, guys, this is Something in the Way by Jessica Hawkins. So the next book that I read after that was Black Hearts by Karina Halley. So this is a cartel love story. This follows a man named Vicente. He is the son of a cartel leader, and he goes to America to meet this older woman who just so happens to have a secret connection with his father, who, like I said before, is the leader of a cartel. So whenever he goes to California, he finds that the older woman is not there, but in her place he ends up meeting her daughter, who he decides to have a relationship with so that he can use her daughter to get closer to the mother. So it is here that he ends up having this relationship with our girl, Violet McQueen, and while it started out as a way to get closer to her mom, he ends up starting to have feelings with her, and things start to get very complicated from there, because the romantic relationship that they have with each other is very, very forbidden, because his father and this woman's mother definitely have a very checkered past. So yeah, from here a roller coaster of emotions starts to arise, and guys, I just have to say that this book was such a quick read for me. I literally read this in one sitting. This author just has such a way at capturing your attention. I honestly love almost every Karina Halley book. She's such a great author. So guys, if you want a very dark, swoon-worthy anti-hero, I would definitely recommend this book to you. And it is worth mentioning that this guy is not just the main character. It's not just written in his point of view. It switches back and forth between Violet McQueen and Vicente. So guys, Violet was also fun to read about as well, but I have to admit that I liked Vicente a lot more than Violet. I just felt like Violet was kind of immature, while Vicente was more older and wiser. And yeah, I really fangirled over Vicente. He was just hot, you guys. Like, if you want a hot, steamy romance, definitely check this book out, because this book was super steamy, okay? So yeah, that is Black Hearts by Karina Halley. The fifth book that I read was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. So guys, this is a fantasy book that was written for an adult audience, but I do have to say that while this is classified as like an adult fantasy fiction type of story, this definitely reads like a YA book. There was nothing really adult or mature about this, because the main characters, in my opinion, were very immature, and they almost seemed like they were in junior high instead of high school. So yeah, keep that in mind. So this book follows a girl named Elle who is going to this high school that is for mages, which is just like another word for people that have like magical powers. She is currently a junior and she's about to become a senior. And at this school, there are no teachers, there are no parental supervision. It is just these group of teenagers that go to the school to learn more about their magic. And the reason why there are no teachers, the reason why they're all on their own, is because they happen to be very scrumptious to these paranormal creatures that love to chow down on these mages with special magical powers. So whenever these mages are inside this school, it is very deadly, because these powerful paranormal creatures just can pop out of nowhere and try to eat the mages. So our main girl, Elle, she is somebody who is very much an outcast. People have never really liked her, and she doesn't know why, but she's trying to survive and trying to make allies with the people around her. She ends up starting to form a friendship with this guy named Orion Lake, and Orion Lake is literally somebody who she actually despises at first, because he is somewhat of a hero at this school, because he makes it his mission to try to save all of the classmates. And so everybody likes him except our girl Elle, because she just is so annoyed because everybody likes him and yet everybody hates her. So they end up starting to form a friendship, and it's here that by the end of the story they have a bit of a romance of sorts, which is blooming. And while this is going on, there are all these paranormal creatures that are trying to come and attack them, and yeah, they end up, Orion Lake and our girl Elle end up forming a type of partnership as they combat against all of these paranormal creatures. So you guys, I just have to say that while there is a romance that is starting to form between our two main characters, I would not actually call this a romantic book at all. So if you're somebody like me and you are all there for the romance, you just eat that crap up, maybe don't read this, because that romance, it just sucked, you guys. That's all I can say. The romance sucked. It was barely a romance. I didn't even realize there was a relationship that was forming between these two main people, because there was no romantic words ever exchanged between them. There was no actual chemistry. They just felt like friends, and by the end, whenever the author was trying to turn them into something more, I just was not really believing it. It just felt forced to me. It was like all of a sudden they started to have feelings out of nowhere, and I just thought that was kind of weird. So definitely don't really read this if you like romance. But if you do like a book that is packed with world building and with fantasy and magic, then check this book out. So that is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Okay guys, the 6th book on my list is called The Unearthly by Laura Talisa. So I have read other books by Laura Talisa which I thought were fun and exciting, but this is actually Laura Talisa's first book that she ever wrote, and quite honestly you can tell that it's her first book because I just had a hard time kind of connecting to these characters. I felt like they weren't that much thought out and that they were just kind of one-dimensional. But let me just tell you really quickly what this book is about. So this follows a girl named Gabriella Fiore who ends up getting accepted to this prestigious private school, and whenever she comes to this private school she ends up finding out that the only people who get accepted at this school are people who are paranormal creatures, and she finds out that she is a paranormal creature herself, and this is something that she never knew of whatsoever because she was adopted. So this ends up being a really big surprise to her, and as she is going to the school she ends up finding out that she is a vampire, and it's here that she ends up meeting and being mentored by this vampire playboy slash vampire king named Andre, and they end up having a relationship. And while this is going on, there is somebody out there who is trying to kill her, and so there ends up being like a mystery as our girl Gabrielle is trying to figure out who on earth is trying to kill her and why. So guys, I just have to say this book was not the greatest. It was definitely one of the books that was my least favorite of the month, and the reason why I had such a hard time reading this book was because, like I said before, the characters felt very, very one-dimensional. It felt like the author just came up with them in like a matter of minutes, and that was that. And then another thing was that I just had a hard time liking our main character. She was just very unlikable to me, and I just did not like how she treated most of the people around her. She was just always so snooty to everybody and just snipey and rude, and she had no reason to act like that. You could just tell that she was a very, very immature character, and I had a hard time rooting for her. So yeah, that is The Unearthly by Laura Talisa. So after reading that book by Laura Talisa, I decided to read another book by Laura Talisa. I wanted to give her another chance at redemption. So I decided to read Rhapsodic by, surprise, surprise, Laura Talisa. So this follows a girl named Calypso who goes by Callie, and she is a siren. And whenever she was young, she ended up murdering her stepfather because he was very abusive and very, very cruel. And she murdered him out of self-defense. And it's here that she ends up calling upon the bargainer, who he is basically known as somebody who can make a deal with him and he can make things disappear and make your wildest dreams come true. But from then on out, you owe him a favor. And so she ends up making this deal with the bargainer, and he ends up covering up her crime. And it's here that she ends up calling upon him several times throughout her teenage years to make a deal with him, but that is just a guise because she just wants to try to know him better. And the bargainer slowly but surely ends up building a relationship with her, and it gets to the point where he actually ends up running away from the relationship that they were building. And it isn't until years later, when our girl Calypso is older, that she ends up meeting the bargainer once again. The bargainer comes back into her life because he is finally ready to call on all of the favors that she owes him, and it's here that they start to have a rekindling as they get to know each other once again, and the relationship that they had a long time ago starts to bloom once more. And while this is also going on, there is somebody in the bargainer's world who is murdering people who he knows, and they are trying to solve this mystery and try to figure out who this murderer is before the murderer strikes again. So you guys, I just have to say that this book was so much better, so much more better than the Unearthly. It was so much better, you guys. The romance was especially better. And I do have to say, what I liked most about this was that this book, while it is mostly based in the present, there are flashbacks to show how our girl ended up meeting the bargainer, and there are flashbacks that show them as they get to know each other and as they build upon the friendship that they had that slowly starts to turn into a relationship. And you guys, I just ate that stuff up. I was always looking forward to the past flashbacks. I just thought that they were the best part of the story. Another thing that I have to say is that while I did like this story and this did definitely keep my attention, I have to admit that the plot and the actual mystery of the story that they're trying to solve was really irrelevant to the story, because I just felt like it ended up being more of a side plot, and it was always put on the back burner as the story focused more on the relationship, and that murder mystery didn't become relevant until the very, very end. And I just felt like the author could have spent so much more time actually exploring the mystery and unraveling everything that was going on, instead of just focusing on the relationship between the two main characters. So guys, this book, it was good and it was fun, and I would recommend this to anybody that just wants to have a fun time and read about a romance. So yeah, that is Rhapsodic by Laura Talisa. So after I read that book, I ended up reading 2 books to this series. It literally ended up being like my favorite book series already of the year of 2021. It is definitely going to be a book that I predict is going to be on my 2021 best books that I read of the year. So without further ado, let me talk to you guys about this book series. So the 8th and the 9th book that I'm going to be talking about is called Rejected by Jamin Eve, and the second book is called Reclaimed. So guys, I'm not going to explain this too much because I actually just released a video last week about my favorite paranormal romance books, and this happened to be on that video. So definitely check that video out if you want to learn more about this book. But basically, I'm just going to give you the bare bones of the story. So this is about a girl who's a werewolf, and she's about to shift for the first time. And whenever she ends up shifting, she finds out that her soulmate is the alpha's son, and he rejects their soulmate bond, and that makes our girl very much upset, and she ends up praying to this guy who is like the alpha god to come and get her out of this situation. The god of the shifters, also known as the shadow beast, ends up showing up and taking her away, and it's here that she ends up living with this guy. And honestly guys, they do not like each other whatsoever. They actually kind of despise one another, but there are certain things that happen that end up making them have to stay together. And guys, this book series was so freaking amazing. I loved the relationship that's built between our two main characters, because it is definitely a hate to love story. So if you are a sucker for enemies to lovers, definitely pick this book up. There is such a slow burn in this relationship. You truly have to sit on pins and needles and just read through the first book to get to the second book, where the romance just freaking blossoms. And you guys, I have to say, it is so worth it, because the romance in the second book was so steam-worthy. It was so amazing, and they are definitely one of my favorite power couples ever. They are amazing. And then I also have to say that I'm just in love with our main character. She is so amazing. She's so feisty, and I love reading her dialogue. She's just so witty, and I found myself laughing so much whenever I was inside this girl's head, and I just loved to hear what she was going to say next, because everything that came out of her mouth was so sassy. So sassy. I freaking loved her so freaking much. So you guys, that is Rejected and Reclaimed by Jamin Eve. So the next books that I want to talk about are 2 books that I actually want to talk about them together because I felt like they were very much alike and had the same type of vibes, and they gave me the same type of feeling, so that's why I'm just kind of combining them together. So those books happen to be the Sweetest Oblivion by Danielle Laurie, and the other book, I don't have it physically, but it is called The Kiss Thief by LJ Shin. I believe that's her name. So I'm gonna post like a little picture like right here of The Kiss Thief. So guys, these two books happen to be like a mafia type of story. Both of them happen to be about an arranged marriage, and they are both definitely an enemies to lovers type of story. And you guys, I just have to say that I enjoyed The Sweetest Oblivion so much more than I did The Kiss Thief. The Kiss Thief happens to be probably the worst book that I read so far. I just really hated that book. Maybe that's why I don't want to talk about these individually, because I feel like if I spend too much time talking about The Kiss Thief, then it's just going to really put me in like a bummer state of mind, because that book just truly knows how to make the happiest person angry and upset. But basically, you guys, I felt like this book, The Sweetest Oblivion, was so much better because while this book, there were times that I was kind of bored, there were some really funny moments, and that's what I really liked about that, because this book is definitely a dark romance, but it was so refreshing to see those lighter moments, and that truly just carried the story for me. Now, the reason why I hate The Kiss Thief so much, and I'm just going to say it really quickly, is because there was definitely a scene in this book that had very iffy consensual type of vibes to it, and I just could not get past that scene. It truly made me start to cry. I could not handle that. And another thing that I hated so much about this book was that it did not feel like a romance at all. The male lead in this story had so much hatred, and he was so cruel, and I felt like there was nothing redeemable about his character arc, like, whatsoever. I absolutely hated him for our main character, and I just wish that they never would have gotten together because our main character was too good for him. I just could not handle how he treated her, and that is just, it was so hard for me to read that. It was so hard, and I wouldn't recommend that book to anybody, honestly, because I just did not like it, and it was not for me. So yeah, that is The Sweetest Oblivion by Danielle Laurie and The Kiss Thief by E.J. Shin. I can't really remember. So yeah, those are those two books, okay? So after that, I read a book that is another one of my favorite books of 2021, and it's definitely a book that I would recommend to anybody to read during the Valentine's Day month, and that just so happens to be Sweet Dandelion by Michaela Smeltzer. So this follows a girl named Dandelion Meadows, and she is somebody who, she was actually involved in a very horrific school shooting, and in the school shooting her mother ended up passing away, and our girl ended up getting shot as well, and she now has a permanent limp, and so she's somebody who she's definitely been mentally and physically affected by this tragedy. And so now she is living with her older brother, and she is going to a new school, and she is going through her senior year of high school, and it's here that she ends up meeting her high school counselor, who she gets assigned to have a daily class with every day so that he can help to counsel her and to talk her through the emotions and trauma that she's dealing with. And it's here that they start to have a forbidden romance. And you guys, I just have to say that that romance that they had was so freaking beautiful and so well written. It was just so well done, you guys. I loved the slow burn of their relationship. You could truly feel the chemistry that they had for one another, and it was just so gratifying to see them as they slowly went from friends to something more than friends to this forbidden relationship that they had with one another. it was just so amazing, you guys. I loved them so much. And another thing that I absolutely loved about this book was the relationship that she had, not just with the main character, with the main love interest, but the relationship that she had with her brother and with the friends that she meets in the story. I just felt like the author did such an amazing job at showing the other relationships that she had with the other people in her life. And I just thought that that was so surprising for me, because most of the time whenever you read a romance, it is very much focused on the couple. But the author did such an amazing time of dividing an equal amount of time for her to focus on her other relationships. And I just absolutely adored her brother in this story. I just loved the relationship that they had for one another. That familial bond that they had was so gorgeously done. It was so amazing. And another thing that just completely took me aback was the lighter moments that was in this story, because whenever I read this book, I was expecting it to be a book that brought me to tears, but instead of crying like I thought I was going to do, I laughed so much, and I had the stupidest smile on my face because the author just sprinkled so much light in this story. And it is just a book that is so beautiful to read about, because it focuses on this type of self-healing that our main girl is going through as she tries to heal and move on with her future after facing such a tragedy. So guys, if you like a forbidden romance, if you like a book about self-healing, if you like a book that focuses on a girl who's trying to learn how to save herself after going through such a tragedy, then definitely read this book, you guys. I loved this so freaking much. It is such a beautiful book, and it was so gloriously done. So yeah, that is Sweet Dandelion by Michaela Smeltzer. So you guys, after reading that book by Michaela Smeltzer, I decided to read another book by her, which is called Finding Olivia. And this book follows a girl named Olivia, and she is a preacher's daughter, and since she was a preacher's daughter, she was not allowed to do a lot of things whenever she was living with her father, because he thought that it would look bad for the church and that it would ruin her image as being the goody two-shoes preacher's daughter. So now she's older and she's now in college, and she decided to move very, very far away from her father so that she can try to have her own life and try to learn and explore the person that she is whenever she is not just known as the preacher's daughter. Our girl decides to make a list while she is in college of the things that she was never allowed to do, but things that she wants to do to try to figure out who she is. And some of the things on this list is things like going to a concert, or losing her virginity, or even going to the beach, because her father never let her go to the beach. I don't understand how going to the beach is bad. Like, I don't get that part, but that is on her list too. And there's also like skinny dipping and just things like that, right? And so she ends up meeting this guy named Trace, and he decides to help her do everything on that list. And it's here that while they are starting to slowly make their way down the list, that she ends up slowly starting to be friends with him and then starting to have a relationship with him. So you guys, this book, for me, it was not as good as Sweet Dandelion, but it was still something that kept my attention. I did enjoy the main love interest named Trace. I thought that he was a really cool character to read about. But while I liked him, it didn't really extend as much to our main character, Olivia. Like some of the other books that I've read, I just had a hard time connecting with her character. I felt like she was very just kind of rude a lot, and she had no reason to be rude. She kind of reminded me of Gabrielle Fiore from The Unearthly. And she was just so rude, and the things that she said was just unnecessary, and I had a hard time liking her because of that. But I could see her personality changing a little bit as she started to loosen up and form this relationship. So while I didn't really like her at first, I did start to like her a little bit more as I started to learn more about her character arc and as I got to see her grow a bit. but I definitely liked the love interest more than I did her. So that is Finding Olivia by Michaela Smeltzer. Guys, after that, I decided to read Come Undone by Jessica Hawkins. So this is an adult contemporary romance, and this follows a woman named Olivia Germain who is happily married. She has an amazing life, an amazing job, amazing friends, an amazing husband, but there's just something that is off for her. While she has this amazing life, she's not happy where she's at, and there's just something that is just off in her life, and she can't figure out what it is. And she ends up having a chance encounter with a man named David Dillon, and he is somewhat of a playboy of sorts. He is a billionaire architect, and whenever she meets him, her life just starts to light up. And it is here that they end up starting to have a forbidden romance and a forbidden affair. And yeah, you guys, this book was fun to read, but it was not as good as I was expecting it to be, because obviously, guys, this is a forbidden romance and they are having a forbidden affair, and I just thought that there was going to be so many like moments that keeps you on like the edge of your seat as you're trying to see like whether the husband is going to find out as they're like sneaking around with each other. But you guys, surprisingly, there wasn't really that many moments like that. The husband was honestly not in the picture that much. For most of the book, he was gone on like business trips, so that just kind of took the suspense out of the picture, and it honestly just felt like a regular romance that I was reading as these two main people got to know each other. So yeah, guys, if you want a forbidden romance, then check this book out, because it does dish a little bit of that heat that is found whenever there is a forbidden affair going on. Yeah, guys, that is Come Undone by Jessica Hawkins. Okay, you guys, so after that, I read Wolf Girl by Leah Stone. And guys, this book was such a quick read for me. I literally read it in like a night. It was that fast, and that's because this book is just such a guilty pleasure for me. And let me just tell you what this is about, okay? So this follows a girl who is a werewolf, but her parents did something bad and it basically made them get kicked out of the werewolf community, and they have to live with the humans. And our main character ends up meeting the alpha's son, and the alpha's son decides to give her a chance and to let her come back to the werewolf community. But the catch is this: in order for her to come back to the werewolf community, she has to agree to compete in this sort of bachelorette of sorts, where the alpha son is meant to pick one girl out of all of the other werewolf girls to be his mate and to have his children with him and to just have a relationship with him. And yeah, so our girl comes over here. She ends up competing in this bachelorette of sorts, and while this is going on, there is a lot of tension between the vampires and the werewolves as the vampires start attacking the werewolves. So yeah, you guys, there is such a great mixture of action and romance. And guys, if you like The Bachelorette, then definitely read this book, because it is basically Werewolf Bachelor. And yeah, guys, I do have to say that this book, it is not something that you should read if you want like the best like three-dimensional characters, because honestly, you guys, these characters were kind of two-dimensional, but the Bachelor quality of it was so addictive, and I just found myself flying through because I loved the pettiness of the story between our main girl and the other contestants. Like, that was so much fun to read about. Another thing that I have to say though is that the relationship between our main girl and the alpha son, it is so cheesy and cringy, and there's definitely an insta love there. While this is like Werewolf Bachelor, there is no competition whatsoever. Our main guy, the alpha son, he is like head over heels for our main girl, and there is no competition with all the other girls. He likes her, and he knows that he's gonna pick her by the end of the story. So yeah, guys, if you just want a quick fun read, then definitely check that book out. But if you are looking for like some amazing plot line and some great three-dimensional story, then yeah, don't really check that out. But yeah, so that is Wolf Girl by Leah Stone. The last book that I read of the month was called Dire Straits by Helen Harper. So this follows a girl who is a paranormal bounty hunter, and something happens where she ends up getting framed for a murder that she did not commit. And so in order for her to get out of this sticky situation that she found herself in, she ends up going through this vampire boot camp of sorts, and going through this changing where if she ends up making it through the vampire boot camp, then she will become a new vampire recruit. And the reason why she goes through this vampire recruitment program thing is because the vampires do not have to go by the human law whatsoever. As soon as you become a vampire, you get absolved of any crimes that you were seen to have committed in your human life. So whenever she gets offered this chance to become a vampire recruit, she takes it up because she does not want to have to be convicted of a crime that she didn't commit. And so whenever she becomes a part of the vampire recruitment thing, she ends up actually trying to solve the crime and try to figure out who framed her for this murder. And it's here that she ends up having a bit of a relationship with the main master of the vampires. And yeah, guys, this book, it was definitely something that it was fun to read about, but like Wolf Girl, the characters weren't as well developed as the other books that I read. But I have to say that it was still a quick read for me, and it was still something that was fun to listen to. I actually listened to it as a audiobook, and I just found myself flying through that recording. I thought that the narrator was fantastic. And yeah, guys, if you just want something quick, something fun, something to maybe get you through a reading slump, then I would definitely recommend that book, because it was definitely a fun book to read. So yeah, that is the end of this video. If you have stuck it through for this whole video, then please make sure to like and subscribe. I post new videos every week. I love you so much. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, guys. Mwah. See you next time.